Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight for our inaugural webinar about learning about the significance of Pond Farm Pottery. It's wonderful to have everyone join us tonight. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Justin Lindenberg. I am the Executive Director for Stewards of the Coast and Redwoods. Our mission is to protect the natural and cultural resources of Armstrong Redwood State Natural Reserve, Austin Creek State Recreation Area, and Sonoma Coast State Park through volunteerism, environmental education, and stewardship for generations to come. Pond Farm Pottery as a program really fits within our mission as potentially the most distinctive cultural resource we have the joy in helping to steward through a variety of initiatives you'll hear about from Birgit. Steward started working on Pond Farm Pottery under the leadership of Michelle Luna, who I think might be here tonight. And it's really a project that's blossomed through people power. Stewards is a grassroots organization powered by volunteers and small donations. Before Lisa introduces Birgit, I wanted to thank everyone again for joining us. We're lucky to have some really distinguished guests tonight, including numerous Pond Farm Pottery volunteers, students of Marguerite Wildenhain, scholars, disciples, and lots of people that knew her personally and know a lot more than we do. It really takes a village, and we're honored that you're all here. The relationship between stewards and state parks, when we started, it was an uphill battle to get state parks to support what we're doing at Pond Farm Pottery. But we're really lucky to have a stronger relationship than ever, and super lucky to have Birgit in her role as a state park employee that's really dedicated to Pond Farm. She's wonderful and talented, and Lisa will introduce her and carry this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Welcome everyone who's just coming in. If everyone could turn your audio off, please, for the duration of the presentation. And right now we're going to turn it over to Birgit Nielsen, Interpretive Senior Park Aide with California State Parks.
I am very excited to be here. I'm glad you could join us, and a very warm welcome, especially to the pond farmers and friends of Marguerite. And before I get started, I do want to mention that today, February 24th, 2025, is the 40th anniversary of Marguerite's death. And so I hope that this presentation will be a fitting tribute to a remarkable woman. Forgive me if I cannot touch on all the aspects. We could do a whole seminar for probably a month on all the different aspects of Pond Farm pottery. So I'm going to share my screen and then figure out whether my mouse will cooperate or not, but we'll keep our fingers crossed. Okay. So I'm going to turn myself. And excuse me if you have the little thumbnails of the speaker, me, in the right-hand or left-hand corner or wherever I may appear. And I am glancing to the side. It is because I do have some notes. So forgive me if that is irritating. Welcome to this presentation on the significance of Pond Farm Pottery, a National Historic Landmark. The illustration that you're seeing here is a painting that one of the artists in residence at Pond Farm Pottery did a couple years ago. Her name is Amber McLean. An overview of what we're going to cover today. I'm going to go into, I call it a brief history. It's probably not really brief, but I feel it's important. And also within that context, to understand the National Historic Landmark designation, to understand what happened at Pond Farm. And then we're going to move into what has been happening at Pond Farm lately and how you can make a difference and what we are hoping to achieve, followed by the Q&A. And this sketch on the left here is by Antje Halter, who stayed at Pond Farm in October. And she is actually from Halle, Germany. So, getting started. The designation of Pond Farm Pottery as a National Historic Landmark in December 23. So what is a National Historic Landmark anyway? It is the highest status that the federal government applies to our nation's cultural resources. And it recognizes a place of exceptional value for commemorating or illustrating the history of the United States for the inspiration and benefit of all Americans. And the picture is of the dedication ceremony that we had in October, and there's Armando Quintero, the Director of State Parks, speaking. We had lots of dignitaries, including people from the National Park Service there and pond farmers, and it was a wonderful day. But to understand the nomination, I want to read you at least one of the criteria applicable to Pond Farm Pottery. And that is that it had to be a property associated with individuals who have made a significant or exceptional contribution to American history. And the property had to be compared to other similar properties to identify the one that possesses the strongest association with a person's contribution. The length of the residency was also an important factor in that consideration. So what we can take from that is that Pond Farm Pottery is unique in the entire United States for its period of significance as the teaching studio of Marguerite Wildenhain for many decades, and also in recognition of the decisive role Marguerite played in the American studio pottery movement. So I want to get into some of the biographical milestones of Marguerite's life. She was born in 1896 in France to a German Jewish father and an English mother, and she grew up in France and Germany and went to school in England for a brief time. So right from the get-go, she grew up speaking 3 languages. In 1919, when the Bauhaus was founded by Walter Gropius, she was one of the first students to sign up, and she was also one of the very few women that joined the Bauhaus. She trained there for 7 years, and before she could applied to become a master, and she became the first female master potter in Germany, a craft that was typically reserved for men. By 1928, she's at this point still in her early 30s. She heads the ceramics department at the Burg Giebichenstein School, which is a school for fine and applied arts in Halle. And it was her form master, Gerhard Marx, her teacher at the Bauhaus, who brought her to the Burg Giebichenstein. But she heads the ceramics department there. And during those years, from about 26 to 1930, she is also commissioned by the KPM, the Royal Porcelain Manufacturer in Berlin, to design modern tableware. And that they then go on to mass produce. When her designs for the KPM are taken to design fairs in Leipzig and Berlin and later on in Paris, every time she wins awards. So she is on track. She's only in her 30s, and she's on track to become a major European designer. But that promise ends abruptly with the sorry, are we having some sound issues? That trajectory of her career ends when Adolf Hitler is appointed Vice Chancellor in January of 1933. After the Nazis threatened to close the school if Marguerite does not leave her position, she does not hesitate and packs her bags, leaving Germany overnight with her husband, Franz. They escape to Holland, where they start from scratch, finding a pottery studio, getting to work, and selling what they make. This goes well for about 7 years. In 1939, World War II starts in Europe, and in 1940, shortly before the Nazis march into Holland, Marguerite is able to get onto one of the last boats leaving Rotterdam for New York. Franz has to stay behind because, unlike her, he has a German passport and he can't leave. She gets to California in 1940. Well, she gets to California in 1940, and in 1942 she arrives at Pond Farm. Then in 1949, the Pond Farm workshops start, and they run through 1952. And in 1953, she starts Pond Farm Pottery and starts teaching every summer her 9-week-long summer sessions until 1980. I will get into some of the other details that I sort of just briefly touched on a little bit later on. So to understand what formed this artist and what it is that she brought to California and to the United States, I want to spend a little bit of time on her background and training. On the upper left here, we have a picture of the Bauhaus workshop near Weimar. There's Marguerite, and there's Max Crehan, her craftmaster, who had been a potter all his life and came from a family of potters. The training there was rigorous. I mean, they started in the morning and they worked every day until the afternoon. They slept in Spartan quarters above the shop. In the afternoons, they tended their garden, growing their own vegetables, and they learned how to make a modest living from their craft. It was a holistic approach to apprenticeship and a rigorous one, as it went on for 7 years before you could even apply to become a master. Note the design of the Bauhaus Pottery Studio, a prescribed number of forms that had to be mastered before you could move on to the next form, a set of kick wheels, wooden boards, benches, a design going back centuries that gets transported across time and, in Marguerite's case, across oceans. When she gets to the Burg Giebichenstein workshop that she sets up there, she sets it up exactly in the same fashion, as we can see from the pictures, going through the same regimen of forms, just as she had done at the Bauhaus. And it is this philosophy and this concept that she takes to California. And here we have Pond Farm Pottery. As Marguerite Wildenhain scholar Dr. Billy Sessions said, Marguerite's kick wheels at Pond Farm are the closest thing to the real Bauhaus wheels on our continent, and they may be unique in the US. Pond Farm Pottery becomes the model for pottery studios far and wide, such as South Bear School in Iowa, and wherever a Pond Farm student sets up a studio modeled after Pond Farm. Repeatedly, we have visitors on tours who tell us that they learned from a student of Marguerite's, and their workshop was exactly like that. Marguerite was certainly not the only Bauhaus artist to come to the US. Among them, Walter Gropius, Joseph and Annie Elbers of Black Mountain College, Laszlo Moholy-Nagy of Chicago School of Design, and others. But Marguerite had staying power and longevity, and in that sense, outlasted her peers. I want to show you a short clip about the Bauhaus? Oops, it's going backwards. Why is that? I had that problem earlier too. Are we going forwards again? No. Oh dear. Sorry about that. There we are. And now it's playing twice. Sorry.
Buildings.
Sorry. You can rehearse as often as you want, and then there's always technical issues. Oh well.
What do folding chairs, boxy buildings, desk lamps, and subway signs all have in common? There's a little Bauhaus in all of them. The Bauhaus was a German design school that united art and technology in a new way. By bringing artists and sculptors together with architects and engineers to teach in partnership under one roof. Students were taught how to think creatively and experiment with different materials, forms, and techniques, applying a holistic approach to design. So, if a student wanted to design a chair, they'd know which materials were strong, comfortable, and easy to mass produce. By the time the Nazis forced the school to close in 1933, some teachers and students had already begun to flee, taking the Bauhaus design philosophy all over the world. Partly why you can see the Bauhaus influence almost everywhere 100 years later.
So I hope you were able to spot Pond Farm Pottery in there. But the Bauhaus was more than just form, functionality, design, or art. It was about the discipline to practice your craft every day. It gave you purpose, and your work became your life. The attention you paid to your work transforms you and expands into all aspects of your life. You create a structure and a discipline for artful living. You had to be an artist first. You had to be an artisan first before you could become an artist. There was no separation between life and work. You lived simply and frugally. And here we have an example of France and Marguerite in Holland. And we know that this is in Holland because look at his wooden clogs that he's wearing. This picture was taken in 1935 in their garden. They worked every day making a living from their craft, cultivated relationships within the community, learned Dutch, and were quite successful for about 7 years. So how did she get to rural Sonoma County? There was a couple called Gordon and Jane Herr from San Francisco that had traveled to Europe in 1939 to find artists for their dream of a retreat away from urban life and from the craziness of the times that they lived in. The Herrs were not immune to what was happening in Europe, especially in Germany, and purposefully set out to find Jewish artists who might like to come. In 1939, after a second visit to Marguerite and Franz in Putten, Gordon writes to his wife, Jane, quote, "What I believe to be essentially good or valuable or right about the Wildenhains' way of living or their work, which is one and the same thing as it should be, I come to this conclusion. Their living and work are basically established on natural truths, derived from natural sources, contact with natural forms, rocks, earth, plant patterns, animal life, or simple life, as with their peasant neighbors whom I visited today with Marguerite." So I think what we can take from that is that there was a rapport, a definite connection, and a shared understanding between the Wildenhains and Gordon and Jane Herr's utopian vision of farming, living off the land, raising their children in a natural environment, practicing their craft, and inviting other artists to join them in this art colony. This experiment, the Pond Farm workshops, started in 1949 after the conversion of the old redwood barn into an artist and pottery studio, and it brought together a group of refugees from the ravages of post-war Europe, including Victor Rees, who did metalwork, Claire Falkenstein, painting, Lucien Bloch and Stephen Dimitrov, who were muralists and had studied with Diego Rivera, Trude Germonprey, who was a weaver, Jean Varda, who did collage, Harry Dixon, metal work, Mary Rank, jewelry. And in 1947, Franz was finally able to join his wife as well, and he came and he taught sculpture. The art colony was not to last. The artist's strong personality clashed. Everyone had different ideas of how things should be taught and how things should be run. And the workshops came to a crashing halt in 1952 when Jane Herr, at the age of 40, dies of breast cancer. She had perhaps been the calming center of the experiment, but more importantly, it was thanks to her inheritance because she had funded this experiment and she had a degree in economics, which was something Gordon was not good at. He was brilliant in his own right as an artist, an architect. He practiced calligraphy, was a wood carver, did tile work, and he made jewelry. And he had big dreams and became frustrated when he couldn't realize them. By 1952, all the artists had left as the colony could not sustain itself. Franz and Marguerite's marriage had ended in 1950, and Marguerite stayed behind by herself. In The Invisible Core, her autobiography, she writes, "I worked. Slowly, I found myself again. And strengthened by the misery I had overcome, I felt that one had to face facts with courage, but that pain one had to supplement or die. I emerged from those years a new person. If I were to be alone, I would try to encompass the whole world in my work. What one could not give to one could give individually to many in manifold ways. Those many were to be my students, my friends." And she taught them the Bauhaus principles. Pond Farm had become her refuge from the world. Nature, she felt, never betrayed her, unlike human beings. She gardened, she grew her own vegetables, she traveled to conferences and schools for workshops. She taught herself Spanish, and in the winter months, she traveled to South America. But the summers were dedicated to her students, most of whom were already trained potters, but came back, many of them came back year after year to start the same regimen all over again: dog dish, flower pot, simple vase, cup, and onto more complex vessels with handles and spouts. No one got to fire anything they made in the 9 weeks, and nor did they get to take anything home. All the clay was recycled by Marguerite for her own pots. Wednesday afternoons were devoted to drawing from nature, and there were daily sessions with Marguerite when she would read from literature, artist letters, and philosophical works. There were also beach picnics, costume parties, and storytelling. Marguerite spent her life working, writing, and teaching, and of that, over 30 years at Pond Farm Pottery. What she gave them, her students, was a lesson in living. In the Invisible Core, she writes, "There's first the simple discipline of coming to work on time and of working enough hours day by day, not only when you are a student, but especially when you're on your own and nobody forces you to work at any time. There's also the mental discipline of always doing your best and of not being satisfied with your achievements, whatever they may be." On September 8th, 1981, Marguerite fires her kiln for the last time. The logbook registers 717 firings. On February 24th, 1985, she dies at Pond Farm. She is 88 years old. Let's hear how some pond farmers described their time studying with Marguerite.
It was like a dream come true for me. It was magical. And even today, when I come back, I feel emotional about it because it was a very formative time.
It was within the aging walls of an old barn on what's now Austin Creek State Recreation Area, where Jane Recadall and Seth Capron fell in love with each other, and the feeling of clay between their fingers.
We met here in 1973. Seth was a student and I was visiting.
During the mid-20th century, Jane and Seth were seeking enlightenment in the ceramics renaissance known as the American Studio Pottery Movement. And the place to find that enlightenment was Pond Farm Pottery in Sonoma County.
People were listening for other critiques, but there wasn't any chit-chat going on. Everybody was really focused on trying to do a really good job.
Pond Farm was a 400-acre artist colony created in World War II by Gordon and Jane Herr. Pond Farm welcomed many artist instructors, but their most influential teacher was Marguerite Wildenhain.
She was a disciplined master and expected that of her students.
Marguerite was a Jewish graduate of Bauhaus, an elite art school in Germany. But just as she was making a name for herself, she was forced to jump on a boat and flee the Nazis in 1940. She told her story in the documentary, Marguerite from Bauhaus to Pond Farm.
We sailed very slowly to the channel full of mines.
When she arrived in the United States, her family provided Marguerite with a job at Pond Farm, and it didn't take long for her teaching techniques to attract pottery students from all over.
She didn't want just imitators. She wanted to launch people.
Marguerite helped design the foot-powered pottery studio in the barn. Jane and Seth recall making thousands of pottery pieces only to destroy them after they were critiqued.
And then after those were done, they were just recycled. So you just take the clay that hasn't been fired and you just like do this and wedge it up and you're good to go.
After a series of unfortunate events, the artist colony came to an end in 1953. But Margaret continued to teach pottery inside the old barn until the 1980s.
She was not of the mindset that you want to go out and promote yourself. She said, don't waste your time on it. Just make good work.
California State Parks eventually bought the property through eminent domain to expand the Austin Creek State Recreation Area, but Marguerite was allowed to live on the property until her death in 1985.
I don't think there are many people who have so much love and gratitude for people as I get. It's sometimes so strong that it chokes me. I can't take it,
Today, conservation groups like Stewards of the Coast and Redwoods help state parks manage Pond Farm Pottery, and they offer guided tours to help inspire the next pottery movement.
It's a wonderful period in my life.
Did it change you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Marguerite instilled just a sense of focus And, drawing with her as much as making the pot, she really wanted to help you see what you were looking at.
From the Pond Farm Pottery Studio in Austin Creek State Recreation Area, I'm John Bartel. Hope to see you in the back rooms.
Oops.
Most people have no clue that in 2024, the best way to make money with Amazon is not with physical products.
Sorry. All right, moving on. Please forgive these little snafus. I want to touch now on some of the events, some of the things that have been happening lately. And if you haven't seen the film that was just mentioned, Marguerite, from the Bauhaus to Pond Farm, you can do so on the pondfarm.org website. We were very happy that the film was screened in 24 across the country at over 200 PBS stations, as well as on national television in Germany. We have screened it on the East Coast. We've screened it in Guerneville at the library. We have also shown it at the Santa Rosa Junior College, coinciding with an exhibit of Marguerite's work. And we are planning more screenings for this year. There's also our tour program, which has greatly expanded, and we have done, aside from the regular 7 public tours, we've done over 25 private tours last year, and there's an increasing demand for it. We have successfully recruited a sizable group of new volunteer docents, and our docents have the chance to tell their take, based on their research of Marguerite's history and Pond Farm Pottery's history, to tell their own narrative, the craft their own narrative of what they want to focus on. And we encourage them to bring their knowledge and expertise to these tours. Hence, no tour is identical, which is, and we get overwhelmingly positive feedback for it. We've gone out into the wider artist community and connected with local pottery studios, schools and arts institutions, and some of the local potters join our tours to do demonstrations at the kick wheel, which is always a great plus with the tour participants. While all outreach is pivotal, we feel that connecting with the local artist community is very important. And here are some of the ones that we've connected with. We work at maintaining good relations with pond farmers. Here you see some of them at the 2024 reunion and during a Q&A session following a screening of the film. As eyewitnesses, the pond farmers are invaluable, but we especially treasure their stories and anecdotes of what it was like studying under Marguerite. These stories also inform our tours, and because it is what people want to hear. Our Artists in Residence program has been running since 2019 and is highly successful. We host up to 6 artists during the from spring through fall. And in 24, we extended the program to include 1 artist from Halle, Germany, the town where Marguerite worked and taught before she fled in 1933. We are excited about this collaboration with the German Arts Foundation, who is sponsoring this artist, and thereby recognizing the value of bringing an artist from the old world here. And this is where the artists get to stay. This house, the Linear House, was once, during the Walker Ranch days, a sheep herder's cabin, but was remodeled in the 1960s when Gerhard Marx Marguerite's form master, announced that he was coming to visit his student. And Marguerite was friends with Ruth Osawa, whose husband, Albert Lanier, was an architect. So she went to her friend and said, "Do you think your husband could?" So he did. He redesigned the building and added multiple windows and created this amazing light within this house.
Oh,
And last year, 2 volunteers added their considerable interior design flair to Lanier House, creating this, what you see here, this tastefully refurbished mid-century cabin with all the amenities of 21st century living. And on to more outreach. We are active on social media, and if you don't follow us and maybe inclined to do so, we are on Instagram and Facebook. And we are also excited about these connections that we have made with German scholars and institutions, because after more than 90 years, Marguerite is not forgotten over there. In recent years, there have been some major exhibits, for instance, at Dornberg, Weimar, at the Bergel Museum. A couple of years ago, there was an exhibit that showed the most amount of her work ever over there. And there was also then a couple of years ago an exhibit in Halle. And there's going to be another major exhibit at the Bergel Museum in Weimar, which is to this year to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the end of the Weimar Bauhaus, and with it the ceramics department. I've already mentioned the Kunststiftung, which is the arts foundation that is funding the artists in residence from Halle. And we've connected with the Jewish Museum in Berlin, as well as the KPM. And the Moritzburg Museum is where Marguerite's works for the KPM, the modern tableware and the vases, are in the permanent collection. I am particularly thrilled about a connection with the Marguerite Friedlander School in Halle, whose very engaged student body saw to it that Marguerite got a stumbling block placed in front of her former home. For those of you who are not familiar with this, Stolpersteine, or stumbling blocks, are an initiative by the German artist Gunter Demnig to commemorate the millions who were displaced, persecuted, or murdered during the Nazi regime. It is a small concrete block with a handmade engraved brass plate that gets installed in the pavement in front of the last known address of the victim. And by 2023, 100,000 stumbling blocks had been placed all over Europe, from Germany to Lithuania to Greece. And here we see Marguerite on the balcony of her apartment in that building, the apartment where she lived with Franz, newly married, and before they left in 1933. And down below, you can see hers is on the right, and the other two are the Frankels, her friends who she rented from and who had owned the building. Onward. One of our newest programs are the school field trips for the 4th grade under Adventure Pass. We want to create a living connection and memory of Pond Farm Pottery in future generations by giving them the chance to understand the teachings of Marguerite and letting them discover Pond Farm Pottery in a creative, playful way. And here we see some more pictures and a list of the schools that so far have been to Pond Farm Pottery, and we look forward to bringing more students to the site this year. The plans for Pond Farm Pottery. There are necessary repairs that need to get done. We would like to finish the display wall, which is a dedicated part of the Armstrong Redwoods Visitor Center. And in honor of the National Historic Landmark status, and we have a beautiful design for that, and we would like to finish that. We are, as I mentioned, we are expanding our tours and will continue to do so and are always looking for docents. We would like to rehabilitate Marguerite's garden as well as her house. And we have a vision for what could happen with her house, but there are necessary repairs that need to happen first. We would like to stage more events at Pond Farm Pottery, and we want to make the Linnea House available to artists outside of the artist residence period as well. And here are some pictures of what some of the volunteer work looks like. Here's staff and volunteers doing gardening work before the dedication ceremony. Here we have some pictures of Marguerite's garden as it once was, as colorful and lush as it was, that we would like to replant. However, with our current understanding of invasive species in mind, as well as climate change and water conservation efforts. And then there was also a wonderful work party at Pond Farm prior to the dedication ceremony where volunteers and staff got together and made the barn and the house sparkle. And it was a lot of fun, to be honest. Because as I said, we have plans, what we would like to see happen with Marguerite's house. Because one of the questions we hear the most often on the tours is, can we go and see our house? And we would like to be able to do that. So we envision it as a visitor center, a research facility / library, something like that. And I've included this lovely photo on the right of her on the window seat right here. To me, nothing is more important than reaching more people, creating awareness to foster the appreciation and understanding of the site among current and future generations. Pond Farm Pottery provides so many life lessons and tells an amazing story of perseverance. And it will be the younger generations that will have to tell the story in the future and care for Pond Farm Pottery. So what you can do for Pond Farm Pottery, if you haven't been, you could join a private or a public tour. If you have any particular expertise or would like to volunteer some time, please contact us. We always love to hear from you. If you can, consider supporting this local National Historic Landmark financially. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to become a docent. But most importantly, please spread the word. And in closing, I have talked enough, and you have put up with the technical difficulties that I or my mouse or whatever have produced. So I'm going to leave you to look at the last 3 slides. They are 2 lovely images that to me capture the beauty of Marguerite at work and in life, and we know that she made no distinction between the two. And a slide thanking some of the organizations that have funded Pond Farm Pottery and its programs in the past and or continue to do so. Oh, come on. There.
Thank you, Birgit. So we have an opportunity now for a little Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm happy to read them out, and we'll have a little chance to answer them.
And if any of the pond farmers would like to answer a question, if you haven't turned on your video, please do so we can see you.
And I'll also say, while we're waiting for questions, this is a perfect time to really ask us, anything about Pond Farm Pottery and what we're doing. You can put your questions in the chat. You can also unmute yourself. Besides just asking questions related to the presentation and Pond Farm Pottery, we would really love to hear from anybody that's joining us tonight that has experiences that they'd like to share, as a student and or otherwise. So really just keeping this an open conversation. And I'm reading lots of appreciation for Birgit. Nice work, awesome job. For the presentation. And I think we're yet to get a question. Let's see. See what we can find. Roy, what do you have?
Well, I'm very glad that you're doing this. I don't know if you realize that there are some other YouTube videos about Marguerite. I've been watching them recently. There's a couple of them that are about the women at the Bauhaus. We were talking about her being neglected, which she once wrote to me about. And what's kind of sad is that here are these new videos about women at the Bauhaus, and guess who is not included. So maybe there's some way that we could look for those and maybe send emails or something to get people to try to focus on her.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a couple folks in the chat, including Billy, who have presented at NCECA, which I will not even attempt to elucidate what the acronym for that is, the National Ceramics Art Council and Education for America or something. Is that close, Billy, or what's
National
NCECA?
Council for Education in the Ceramic Arts, I
I
think.
was darn close.
Yeah, you had them all there, just kind of.
There's some fantastic presentations that are on YouTube for that as well.
I did have a couple of more personal little things about her that makes her become more alive that I remembered from my research, if you wouldn't mind me mentioning
Please.
them.
Yeah.
The first one, when Birgit was speaking about how, they left the next day for Holland, Marguerite implied that, yes, she shoved her tools in her pocket and away they went, but no, she carried many, many Mark's sculptures with her. So I think, and mattresses and all kinds of stuff that even came over on the ship. So she did manage to take quite a bit when she did flee. It's true she fled, but she managed to grab up quite a bit of stuff because she dragged them all the way to Pond Farm. And then the other thing, when Birgit was speaking, there was that couple-year lag between when she got to Oakland and then moved up to Pond Farm to start building the house. She lived with this Swedish family. She actually got a job at CCAC, California. Oh, see, there I go.
College of Arts and Crafts.
Thank you. There you go. And she taught ceramics there during the day, but she was really frustrated because the kids would go off to other classes and wouldn't just stay in ceramics all day. Of course, this was frustrating. I mean, she really, really didn't like it. But at night, she worked for this family that had like a sort of a cafe coffee shop thing in the bottom floor of their house. And she actually put on a Swedish traditional fluffy skirt and the headgear and everything and waited tables. And I just thought that was so cute for her to do that. And I did wonder, you guys, Birgit, where did you guys get that photo of France and Marguerite there in Holland at the Little Jug Pottery? I've never seen that before. It was wonderful.
Well, my great source or resource, I should say, is Katja Schneider. And she has access to a lot of photos because she typically writes the catalogs that are published to coincide with the exhibits. And so I borrowed that, you know.
Oh, that was nice. Thank you.
I didn't even ask. I have the catalog and I thought, hey, you know.
Yeah.
I'm curious where she got her clay from at Pond Farm. Did she dig the clay or did she buy the clay somewhere else?
She didn't dig it.
No, she had it delivered in dry, 50-pound bag.
Oh,
and she had a pug mill, and so mixed her own recipe for the clay there. And as students, at the end of the summer, we would make a lot of clay for her to use through the year. And we always liked to make more than she wanted. So we would be sure she'd make more pots than she thought she could.
That's great. Thanks.
So there's another question in the chat from JLIESKE. Can someone speak to what is distinctive about Marguerite's style of pottery and creativity?
I think I could maybe say something. If you look at the history of the Bauhaus, it really has two phases, and she talked to me about this. She was in Dornberg, where she studied at the pottery, folk pottery, and so she wasn't really at Weimar a lot after the foundation period. But if you look at those two areas, those two periods in the Bauhaus, the one that gets celebrated is the late Weimar, and then also in Dessau, and it becomes much more geometric, and it's much more, directed toward machine production. And she had done machine production with the Berlin stuff, but I think you would say that her stuff stands out, and maybe this is why she's not being included. It's very expressionistic. It's very rough. It has a lot of textural characteristics in it, and it doesn't try to hide the human hand. So she doesn't fit the stereotype of the Bauhaus. She wrote to me once and said, "That's not the way it was at all. The way they're saying it, it wasn't like that," and whatever.
But wouldn't you say that there's also a great variety in her what she made? I mean, when you look at early works from the 20s, and then particularly, the things that the tableware that she made for the KPM, compared to what she made in what she made in Holland, and then later what she made at Pond Farm. I mean, this is it's a wide spectrum. I mean, there's no one style.
Yes, much wider than most of the people that we associate with that school.
And there was another question from Linda. The pottery from Pond Farm is stunning, but I don't understand what made it stand out from the pottery created by others who might not have been involved with Pond Farm. What makes it special, or is it the lifestyle and dedication of Pond Farm participants that has brought it recognition? And Jane wrote a response. Jane, do you want to respond to that question?
Well, I just wrote that I think the dedication that we experienced, which was translating from the Bauhaus, it really caused us to work at a very deep level, and I think that that carries through. I mean, there is a lot of beautiful pottery made all over the place, different styles, but it really was about total immersion and dedicating your life to it. It wasn't a hobby. It wasn't just something you could do outside of whatever else you did. I mean, we weren't there to have fun. We were there to really learn how to work and how to become or set the stage for the opportunity to be artists. Not that all of us became true artists, but we really had that approach. So a lifestyle.
And I would totally add, it's really interesting to get a couple questions about her pottery itself. Much of what we try to convey through the work that we do at Pond Farm Pottery and tours and otherwise is the ideas and the ideals and the ethos and what she taught as her pedagogy. So, the pottery itself is really important. That is the creation that comes out of it. But the artist as themselves and the way that they think about it and approach it and the way that they look and see, which is both book that she wrote, um, you know, that's really the significance that she brought to America and the studio pottery movement was through, teaching people to look and see and think differently and to instill those ethos and values in the works that they create, not just the works themselves, but themselves as artists and the way that they approach the work that they create at the same time.
Yeah, well, I'd have a couple of comments too, because for me it was all about her inspiration. I mean, people could make great work, but to inspire the students, I mean, she could spend 2 hours in a coffee break and people would just be agog and just, tell us more, tell us more. She'd read stories, she'd read letters from, the Bauhaus, the other artists, and you got this, not only her view, but you got this world view of what was going on creativity wise around the world from other artists. And I mean, for me, it was more of a personal. I mean, of course, there was all the steps and the technique, but her being in nature by herself and how much she learned about animals, nature, the leaves, the trees, the plants. I mean, all that's infused in her pots, and you may not find that in a city, in somebody that's teaching pottery in a city somewhere. So it was, I mean, the way she presented it, I think was special for me.
I think that one of the reasons why she stood out and she became so well known and so influential was through her books. And they were different from books on pottery as a craft, where you would buy a book on pottery and it would tell you all about, how to throw a pot, how to work with the clay and how to glaze it and all that sort of thing. And when her book came out, Pottery, Form, and Expression, it was about life. It was about philosophy. It was about Dao De Jing, Taoist philosophy, and I remember her reading from Alice in Wonderland when I was a student there, and what else? T.S. Eliot, and just all sorts of things that had nothing, one would think, to do directly with pottery, but they had everything to do with pottery.
Could I say something about?
I would love to let you speak.